Coach. Hey, thanks for joining me today on this special Simple Coach to Coach interview. I appreciate you taking the time, especially knowing that you're an assistant coach and you don't have the time, since I'm sure you're being kept very, very busy. So very grateful you carved out some time to talk to me today.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I really appreciate it. I'm excited. Should be good.
Oh, definitely it'll be good. It is always good.
Yeah.
Anyhow, actually, you know this because this is how it sort of happened. I spoke with Coach Axtell last week, had a great conversation as I always do. Big fan of you guys, and he asked if I ever wanted to speak to an assistant, and I'm always willing. And so you're I'll say the second assistant coach to come on board. So I hope you're ready for it. I have. I prepared the super hardest questions I could think about. So, hey, let's just start with the basics. You're young. You're just, in relative terms, you're just sort of getting into this as you're an assistant coach. Can you just talk a little bit about your soccer journey? Play. Where'd you end up? How did you end up getting to Cortland working with Coach Axtell?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Vermont. So I'm from kind of like around the Burlington, Vermont area, Milton, Vermont. And so when I went through the college process myself as a player, had a couple different options in the New England area, kind of all looking at a couple different Division III schools. Ultimately decided on Castleton University, so public school in Vermont. During my time, and again, that was a phenomenal decision for me for a number of reasons. Being able to stay, in Vermont, and being close to home while also, playing a great brand of soccer and having the career I did there was an unbelievable experience. I think it just so happens, right, that 4-year period I was there, I think a lot of the top players coming out of Vermont. I think our head coach did a phenomenal job of getting a lot of those players coming out of Vermont. It is a smaller talent pool than other states, just generally from a population standpoint.
Yeah.
So, so there is kind of a reality with that. But no, obviously I loved my time at Castleton, had an opportunity to win a conference championship and go to the national tournament with them, which is a phenomenal experience. And I had a great mentor there, John O'Connor, head coach there for a while. He was the head coach at University of Rhode Island before Castleton and was the head coach of University of Chicago before that. So he really opened my eyes to, everything of what it takes to be a successful college soccer coach. And I ended up working at a summer camp while I was as a player called Camp Winnetou, which is a large overnight boys sports camp. And so through that experience, I met a lot of different college coaches and college players, and that opened my eyes to how great coaching is. I wanted to go into teaching. I thought I was going to be a high school social studies teacher, and that was kind of the plan. Then I realized coaching every single day. I'm like, so many different parallels from teaching to coaching. I can do what I love, which is soccer. So when I graduated during COVID. And so when I got sent home because of COVID during March of 2020, I'm like, well, this is it. I'm going to throw everything I have at trying to get into college coaching. So I went and applied to pretty much every graduate assistant job that was open across the country. Like, I didn't care where it was. So that was NAIA, Division III, whatever it may be. Ultimately found an opportunity at the University of Dubuque. So in the American Rivers Conference. So definitely
You're going, man. You're committed.
100%. I'm like, this is it. I'm putting all my chips, I'm throwing it down, and we're going to Dubuque. And so, and that was the best decision, one of the best decisions of my life. I was able to get my master's degree in sports management while also, being a graduate assistant and really getting to see what it was like to be a college coach. And I was in a really fortunate position we of course had a lot of success in the time that I was there relative to where the program had been in the past. But on top of that, I was given a lot of autonomy within the group. I really felt the coach gave me a lot of responsibility within, even just being 22 years old. So I really felt connected to the successes and even like the low moments, right? Like, I felt a part of it, so which was phenomenal. Brad Johnson, he actually just recently, stepped down, but he
Yeah.
did a phenomenal job at the University of Dubuque. He's now out of the game, but
Hmm.
University of Dubuque is a new school. Like it's a new school and a newer soccer program. I think the
Hmm.
soccer program only started in the early 2000s. So he really took it from the ground up to,
Hmm.
by the time we were leaving, became a regionally ranked program and was, a team that was really competing for the top end of the ARC and what used to be called the IAC.
Hmm.
And so that was a phenomenal experience. And then after my 2 years with that graduate assistant role, I started applying to, full-time assistant jobs that I felt would be a right fit for me. And again, I
Hmm.
didn't really care as much about where I went. I just wanted the right fit and the
Hmm.
program that had the same ambition and drive that I had and the
Hmm.
same goals.
Right.
And the Cortland opportunity came up. Went through the hiring process, and Steve was able to, in the school, flew me out from Dubuque
Hmm.
to Cortland, and for the finalist, part of the process, and flew home and got offered the job the next day. So, and then from that, I mean, again, I would say a great decision was going to Dubuque in the first place, but in regards
Hmm.
to so far in my soccer career, that's
Hmm.
probably the most proudest I've been so far
Yeah.
is was getting the job at Cortland because I mean, I know you're really familiar with Steve Axtell
Yeah. Yeah.
and the program.
You.
I mean, I couldn't have dreamed of a better
Yeah.
spot, not just
Yeah.
from, the success of the program, but the values that he stands for and the program
Yeah.
stands for
Yeah.
and how things are operated here. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better mentor, a better program to
Yeah.
really help, bring it forward and keep it going. So yeah, that's kind of my path so
I,
far.
I'll say you can't. There's very few people that you're going to be able to connect with as early in your career, like Coach Axtell. Like
Yeah.
right, like he's just brings so much to the table that I think you're on a path, right? If you whatever you learn from him, you're on it's only going to be good. So, um, let,
100%.
let me ask you. This is more of a I guess you've been there. You've been at this is 2 years, 1 year.
Yeah, going up on my third
The
season
third,
is this
third,
fall.
yeah, third. That's what I thought. That's two. Yeah. Um, but maybe for folks who don't know, and now you can do it generically. What I mean, what are some of your responsibilities within the program? Right, as the assistant, obviously you're taking direction. You got to support. But sort of, what does your day to day look like, and what are you responsible for doing? Yeah, as an assistant.
Yeah. So the biggest one at Cortland is the recruiting coordinator. So,
Mm-hmm.
Steve has certainly, given pretty much all the reins in regards to like, not only going on the road and identifying
Mm-hmm.
players, but
Mm-hmm.
also taking them really through the process. So that's a lot of my time, right? And so not just from guys that we're identifying ourselves, all the guys that are reaching out to our program, via email, right? And like really keeping that super organized and understanding where we're at with each class. That's a massive part of what I do. And so that's especially right now, right? I mean, we're actually in a spot now where we're pretty much wrapped up with our senior class, so it's
Mm-hmm.
really trying to identify 2025s and going through the process with that has been a lot of my time. Um, and then as well, so I would say recruiting is definitely the biggest one, especially right now. In the fall, I actually, and again, this is another reason I'm super, excited to be able to work with Steve in the program is he actually gives me a lot in regards to like being able to lead on field practice sessions and like being able to be a lead voice even on the field, right? So I think it's pretty consistently I'm doing a part of practice as like a lead voice, which is great. But I would say the secondary responsibility outside of the recruiting, especially right now, is really working on a lot of the stuff that we do with team culture, right? I think with our program, right, like that's the biggest thing and our biggest kind of like the value of who we are is just like how we operate even outside of the soccer field. And so it's a pretty
Mm-hmm.
holistic experience being a part of the Cortland soccer program. And so
Mm-hmm.
everything that we do from like team meetings and working on, like academic check-ins, a lot of the stuff that we do with like our character development stuff, like I take a pretty big lead with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then as well during the season, I know I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but then during the season, I'm kind of the travel coordinator as well. So like
Okay.
itineraries, all the hotels we stay in, all the food that we get. That's kind of up to me to make sure that's planned and prepared and ready to go for every trip that we have. That kind of makes up a lot of
Yeah.
what we do, or what
How
I do, I
many?
should say.
How many? Now I'm curious. Like, how many kids do you say are part of your recruiting world in any given year? Like, yeah, how many kids would you say are in the, hey, this is your pool, 100, 250. This is the pool, and from there we're going to select 10 or 8.
Right. I actually keep an organized log of pretty much everyone that reaches out to us, and whether
Mm-hmm.
it's something we're interested or not, remains to be seen. And there's a method to the madness of where we kind of
Mm-hmm.
see them for each player. But I do like
Mm-hmm.
to have a log of pretty much everyone that we like see, or guys that have reached out, or guys that we're interested in,
Mm-hmm.
and just keep a massive log of that. And then I kind of within that, kind of like an Excel file in
Yeah.
front Rust, we kind of organize it based on, again, there's different things, right? Like whether it's a positional need or just how the quality of that player, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we certainly are pretty specific with it. And we just try to get as much information on the player as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets to a point in the year, probably, we were attending quite a bit of showcases right now. So it's usually later in the spring, Steve and I will meet and kind of look at that and kind of see which players we want to really push forward with and what players we might need to slow play a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say, I mean, it's definitely the initial pool is a couple hundred, that's for sure,
Mm-hmm.
if not more. Um, and then it's kind of narrowing it down from there.
Yeah.
And really kind of, again, we don't really take a guy ever after only seeing him play once live. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're pretty extensive with the process, and we really try to watch guys as many times as we can. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it starts with a big pool, but like we really try to make it, a pretty intensive recruiting process. So like I like to get on phone calls with guys a lot, and like we certainly do our due diligence with guys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this last class was, again, I think the class that we have committed this year was the first class I was able to take really like through a full
Through a full
cycle.
cycle. Yeah.
The last class I kind of took, again, I started in the fall, but there were already guys they were already working with, so it was kind of like an in
Mm-hmm.
between phase a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But this class that's coming in, we're super excited about. But again, like it was a class that I was able to fully, I think, have my stamp on a little bit, which
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's been great. It's been good.
Do, do you? I mean, I would assume. I'd assume that you sort of do this work to whittle it down, and then you guys sit down and say, okay, based on my assessment, these are the guys we're going to want to concentrate on, and then sort of Steve steps in and sort of maybe closes the deal at that point. Is that fair to say, or are you like literally, hey, I'm putting the responsibility on your shoulders to bring in a talented class from start to finish?
It's certainly a collaboration. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, right? Like, he does, especially towards the end. But when it comes to like a lot of the, and I should say as well is we operate a pretty big camp operation, that
Mm-hmm.
ID camp
Yeah.
operation that allows us
Yeah.
which has been a massive recruiting vehicle for us.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve is, a massive part of that. So naturally, I would say probably half of our recruiting class comes from that. And
Yeah.
Steve's kind of obviously there working with me and alongside with the
Yeah.
identifying process with that. Um, but again, right? Like if it's a guy that I happen to just see on my own,
Yeah.
right? If he has full trust in me to be able to like
Oh,
take him through the whole visit, and it's usually until like the on campus part, and Steve will have done his research and known and talked to
mm-hmm.
coaches or whatever. But yeah, like it's dependent on the player.
Mm-hmm.
But again, he really does give me like pretty much full autonomy with it,
Mm-hmm.
which is great, and I love that, right? And that's something with both roles I've been at. Like I want as much on my plate as possible. Like I
Yeah.
want, and so you don't. But not some assistant coaches don't always get that, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
some head coaches that want to be. They really just want to be doing it all, and it can
Yeah.
be. I know delegating, especially with college soccer, and
Yeah.
head coaches and all coaches feel so connected to it. That can
Yeah.
sometimes be a difficult thing to do, and whether how much delegation is right or wrong, right?
Yeah.
Who's to say, right?
Yeah.
But I'm certainly grateful that I've been in a position where I've been able to have delegated to what I think are pretty important aspects of the program, and so no, it's been great.
Um, I, all right, this is maybe a little comparative. All right, so your experiences at Dubuque, your experiences at Cortland, and you were a player, Division III player.
Hmm.
What surprised you the most of the leap from being the player to now being an assistant?
When you say leap, do you mean in regards to like
Yeah.
responsibilities
No,
or?
no, no. Just the perspective on your perspective as a player, what the program is versus sort of now you're on the inside of a program and you control, you're in control of things, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah. So I'm just curious if you noticed or anything that jumped out where you're like, what I was not expecting, or I thought this was one way and it turns out to be another. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
I would say the biggest one is I think going into it, I probably thought that 80% of my job would be like on-field coaching,
Mm-hmm.
whereas it's probably less than like 10% or less than
Yeah,
5%,
yeah.
like
You don't
realistically.
do much of that.
No, no, it's so much more admin work and
Mm-hmm.
being on the road, and I think there's way more than I think even players like realize what coaches do like in the office
Mm-hmm.
and when they're at, especially when the season's not happening. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I definitely didn't recognize it as a player,
Yeah,
um, but naturally, I've loved that because I like all the other stuff. Like I love
yeah,
all the other stuff too, and that's
yeah.
why it's been a great fit for me. So.
Hey, can you go back and talk a little bit about about the culture at Cortland, the soccer culture, your program culture that you put so much emphasis on? I know I've talked to Coach Axel a number of times. He reminded me 3 times, and it is invariably a big chunk of the conversation does touch on how important culture is for the program. I wonder maybe from your perspective how you see that, how impactful do you think it is, and how much work you have to put into it, right? Because it takes forever to build, and it takes one knucklehead to destroy, right? Like I always say.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think I do think culture can be a bit of a buzzword, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and for us, it is everything that we do. And I kind of, even for me, I thought I knew what a good culture was and like what it took. But then being in Cortland, it like really opened my eyes to like what that truly means. And so I think the easiest way to explain it is it's a really holistic experience with us. So
Mm-hmm.
the same high performing mentality that we have on the field, like in every training, right? Like we have this definitely this feel on our team in every practice that there is an unbelievable will to win everything that we do, right? And so there's the same ideology we have on the field. We have the same ideology with the academic side of things too, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like the same efforts we're putting on the soccer stuff, we're equally putting the same amount of time, if not more, on like being the best students that we can be. And then on top of that, we put the same amount of effort into just being the best people that we can be too, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that's pretty unique, and I've heard it talked about, I guess, in other programs that I've been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a reality where I think there's so much talked about your life as a student and your life as an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also 80% of your life where you're not acting as a student or an athlete. You just have your regular everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that we focus a lot on is like helping guys just become the best possible versions of themselves, even of course on the field and of course as students, but it's also just how you operate in your everyday life. And there's a lot of different things that we do as a program to help push that out. We stay on it, and even like right now, like with it being in the spring, like if anything, we're even more intensive right now of like making
Mm-hmm.
sure guys are like still operating to a level that they the goals that they set out for themselves and doing the things they know that they should be doing. And we really challenge our guys, and so there's certainly a sense of accountability within the group, and it's a super high standard, and so I do think that approach, right, of of course we want to win, but we want to win by also doing everything the right way and still being the best people that we can be, while also having that kind of like that beast mentality of still wanting to dominate everything that you do, while also having that moral compass that we never lose track of. And so, and I think that approach has actually resulted in more wins on the field than if we just focused on the soccer side of things. I think that approach, the byproduct of what you do, is winning, and that's something that's really opened my eyes. I think, being a part of Cortland.
Did, how selective do you become in the recruiting process? Like, how many guys do you weed out because you're like, there's something about him that is, I don't want to say trouble. That's a terrible word, right? But like, could be problematic. Again, for your team culture, does that happen, or is it more bring a guy in and then we will get him to be fully bought in?
It's more the second option, to be honest. I think probably a little bit of a balance. I don't think you can have all players that you think are a massive question mark on the culture, right? Like, you need to have a core of guys that are going to be great for what we stand for and who we are as a culture. But if there are some guys that we think maybe there's going to be an adjustment period, we still take chances on those guys, because we believe our culture is so strong and the foundation, like everyone on the group is so bought in, that it's pretty hard to steer away from if you're a part of it. So even if you're not used to, that type of approach in regards to how you are with the team and who you are, I think naturally being a part of it, you get bought into it pretty quick. And I've, even just from my 2 years at Cortland, I've seen a number of examples of that. So I think it's really just finding the best soccer players that we can be, that we can find, I should say. But of course, there is a balance, right? You still need to have guys that right away are going to be right in line with what we're doing in regards to even outside of the soccer stuff. But I would say, again, it's more like the second option that you alluded to.
Yeah. All right, so this is a loaded question, so I apologize.
Okay.
Can you just talk about, because this is another thing I think people from the outside don't realize. Can you talk about maybe a scenario or a situation where you don't necessarily agree to how Coach Axtell is doing something, and how do you resolve that, right? Because I think most programs that are good, the last thing they want is an assistant coach that is just all yes, right? Like, yep, whatever you want, whatever you want. Because you're not utilizing somebody else's perspective to shape a program. So I don't know if that's too complicated a way of saying, like, heck, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Is there anything that comes up that's in your mind where you're like, hey, I think this would be a better approach, knowing the players and how you resolve those, I'll just say, differences, not that they're necessarily differences, but
yeah, I mean, Steve and I have a great relationship. So I feel very comfortable letting him know exactly how I feel, and I don't feel like I have to like hold back how I feel. Like, I feel very heard in our professional relationship. And he encourages it. Like, he wants input. He wants this to challenge things. And I think that's a big part of who we are. Like, we challenge each other a ton, whether it's tactically, so like how we're preparing for opponents, or how we're just operating internally within the group. He encourages that environment, so it allows me to feel the freedom to speak my mind. Now, as an assistant, I know not everything I suggest is going to be played out, and that's great. Right. That's fine, but I feel hurt. But sometimes the other side of that coin is sometimes we do act on it, and sometimes it's great and it works out, right? So I think it's just having that relationship that's unbelievably honest with each other. And he creates a culture within not just with myself, but our coaching staff that is very cohesive, and it's very, any sort of situation, he kind of makes it an open table discussion with the group. It's like, okay, this is my thoughts on how I want to attack whatever it is that we're discussing that day.
Yep.
What are your guys' thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say something every time. Like if I ever disagree, I'm not going to hold back.
Yeah.
I certainly let it know. But again, though, we are pretty much on the same page with a lot of this stuff. I do think.
No, of course, right? Like there's
doesn't
always going to
have
be
to
that
swap.
80%, right? Like
Right.
you agree on all that stuff, but I'm sure you're just two different people. But that was
For sure.
yeah.
No, absolutely.
Uh,
Of course.
There's another thing I was always curious about. Like, do you see yourself closer to the players than maybe Coach Axtell does, just by nature of your role? Are you sort of the guy that they like? They have an issue, they'd rather go to you first to sound it out before they go to Coach Axtell? Because my sense was always the assistant coach tended to get a little closer to the players because they could be a little bit more honest, or I don't know how to describe that, but
Yeah, yeah. There always is a sense of that,
yeah,
right? And so, being an assistant coach, right? Like a lot of that role is kind of being the in between, of
yeah,
like being someone that the players can come to, right? That they can obviously feel heard because there's some things that maybe they want to address that they're not comfortable bringing up right to the head coach right away.
mm-hmm.
So I think being available in those moments, I think, is important. But again, it is a balance, right? And so it did help. We had a second assistant the last 2 years, Blake Aronson, who he was a little bit younger than me and a little bit and played for the program. Was a first team All American at Cortland, and he was able to. I think that was a big part of his role. I of course had that as well, but I think it was a little more on him because again, I still had a lot of lead voice stuff within the program and how we operate. So I of course make myself available for all the guys, and so yes, to answer your question, yes, but that's a tricky balance. I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
like for assistant coaches, like when I went to Dubuque, I was 22 years old, so there were 4 or 5 players that were older than me that I was coaching, which like to earn the respect of those players while also, you know, feeling like that they can come and talk to me, but they can also see me as an actual coach and not just one of their peers, right? Like that's a challenging thing coming into coaching. Part of me is a little bit fortunate that I didn't coach at the school that I played for because I think that's a super difficult thing to do. I think it's really hard to because so many of those players just know you as the player. And that's why it was super important for me when I went through the process. I need to get somewhere where it's brand new. Brand new, they can see me for being a coach and kind of rebrand myself a little bit. So, so yeah, that's what I would say for that.
It's interesting. How would you describe your season?
A success. I think. I think this year was a little less question marks than the season prior. So in 2021, we had a lot of there was a lot of fifth year seniors. So 2022, we kind of, we really had, it was quite a change to the lineup. I think it was probably 9 players that were new to the lineup. So there was there were certainly some growing pains that came in 2022. Of course, we ended up going to the round of 16 and, had a phenomenal year. But this year going into it, we knew, at least from a personnel standpoint, a little more about what was coming. Which of course helped with preparation and helped in preseason a little bit more we knew what we were getting out of guys a little bit more. But I thought it was great, right? Anytime you're able to go and win a conference championship and get the ability to host tournament games and to be able to go to the Sweet 16 is great, right? It's awesome. So a success, right? But again, I will say we've reached it. I think Steve's alluded to it quite a bit. We've reached that Sweet 16 stage quite a bit, right? So, of course, we're grateful for getting to that stage in the tournament, and we know how hard it is to get to that stage, right? It's super difficult. So to do that, you can't discredit that. But internally within the group, we talk about what our culture is and what our guys push for and what keeps them pushing. It's definitely moving the needle forward and how do we get to that next stage. And the margins are so thin. They're so thin, right? And it's in Division III soccer, it's unbelievable, right? And so for us, it's just continuing to try to maximize who we are, and But again, I thought it was a great year.
I I don't know if it was the kiss of death, but you were one of I said if there is a team on the that maybe people aren't looking at to win the national championship, and I thought it was you guys because I thought you were that good. But you do have this, I don't know, barrier. Like I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
if it's psychological or man, you get to the Sweet 16 and then it doesn't pan out. And anyhow, I thought you guys can. I do. I still think I don't. That doesn't change my mind about you guys, right? Like I just think like you at some point that's a barrier that you'll break through. You just got to keep doing it, right? Keep learning all right, so I got to ask you. This is another loaded question. I'm sorry. Where do you see yourself in like 5 years? I mean, do you?
yeah,
I mean, at some point, right? You gotta break away from the tree, right? And
yeah.
you gotta go out on your own. I mean, yeah, yeah. I'll just say that. Is that the thought,
Yeah.
or you still learning so much where you're like, I'm good to go for now?
Yeah, I think I have to remind myself sometimes that I'm still 25.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going
So am
into
I,
what is
by the way.
yeah,
Just
yes,
in case anybody was
yeah,
wondering.
yeah. No, it's good to clarify. Yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So I think I'm still learning a ton. Um, I'm grateful for the experiences I've had so far at a young age, and if what I would have told you, if someone would have told me I've had the experiences I've had so far at 25, you would have told me that when I was, graduating college, I wouldn't have probably believed you, to be honest. But again, 5 years time, probably yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm definitely there. To be honest, full transparency, I think if I was to take over a program now, I'd feel comfortable. I really would, and I think
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
that's
I would do.
interesting.
I think I
Yeah.
would do phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think again, and part of that comes from I've been in positions at both Dubuque and Cortland where I've been given a lot of autonomy within the group and
Mm.
with what I do and my responsibilities.
Yeah.
Um, so there's not much I think that of course anytime I know that first year of head coaching experience I'm gonna learn a ton, and it's some stuff
Yeah.
that I'm never gonna learn until I am put in that spot,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I get that. But in regards to like assistant coachings, that role, and especially as it pertains to Division III soccer and like the roles of responsibilities, I've really been fortunate to get a lot of that,
Mm.
and so, um, but I'm certainly not. I'm always learning. I'm
Yeah.
always learning. I'm always growing, and when the right opportunity comes, right, like I'll know it, and I
Mm.
know I'll be ready for it when that time comes. But for right now, again, like I'm still learning. I'm still, I still have this sense of unfinished business here with Cortland a little bit. Like I
Mm.
really, I still it still feeds that like
Yeah.
competitive
Yeah.
fire that I have here, and there is that sense even just within the group. There's this like sense of like unfinished business. Like we want to cannot wait for the fall, right? And I know a lot of that's going to keep coming, and eventually, like you said,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to find that right opportunity. But
Yeah.
um, again, keep learning. And I will say that's one of the reason why I would love to know the statistics of how much Simple Coach content I listen to on a weekly basis. It's unbelievable.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah, but it's because I want to learn as
Yeah.
much as I can. So to have a platform where I can listen to head coaches from all over, guys that I know and guys that I don't, and listen to how different coaches operate, right? Like for an assistant coach that's just trying to learn and be the best coach possible and the best coach there is, right? Like that stuff's invaluable, right? So it's
Yeah.
like that's kind of the mindset I have right now is just keep getting better.
Well, first of all, thanks for the plug. Really do
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, yeah,
I will say I say this unabashedly. Like if there's one thing sort of eye opening to me in this whole YouTube thing, aside from being feeling great about being a YouTube influencer, the thing that amazes me is the quality of the coaches. Like the I mean like some of these guys I talk to, I'm like, you're a special coach. Like, and it just, I put Coach Axel in that category where I'm like, there's something about you that everything aligns to being a great coach. And again, I don't care wins or losses. To me, it's about, it's more about what you're doing with young men and forming young men. And I think that the amount of guys out there and ladies who have such an impact, it just amazes me. And so, yeah, I'm glad I could provide you a platform, but
Yeah.
it's those folks who, grind it out day in and day out that I think are amazing, So,
No,
and
absolutely.
just think, now you're going to be on the platform, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
you can't. So,
That's great.
hey, one last one, maybe a couple more, but
Yeah.
for you. Without getting in trouble, what do you think for the fall? What are your Do you have expectations? Are you chomping at the bit? Are you, ready to make another run? Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Certainly ready to make another run. I'll tell you
Yeah,
that. Tell you, just internally within the group. I'll tell you what.
yeah,
You know, part of that is the way you bow out, right? Like,
yeah,
so I know like how that Middlebury game played out. I think definitely left a nasty taste in our guys' mouth a little bit.
mm-hmm.
To go 2-0 up, you know, what we thought was a game plan that was phenomenal and working really well, and for it to end up how it did, I think was I think anytime you bow out and your season ends, that's heartbreaking for any
Yeah, yeah,
program. I think with the added context of what we've been going through, I think that was super tough. But with that, I think that has made our guys hungrier than ever, right? And so we are unbelievably excited. I think we have
mm-hmm.
a big core coming back, which is always great.
Mm-hmm.
So to have that consistency is always great. It's not like a similar to a mass exodus. It seemed like it happened in 2021. We don't have that as much,
Mm-hmm.
and we're really excited about this class that's coming in. I think, you never know until guys actually get there and are in preseason. Everyone can have their thoughts on how certain players will pan out.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're super excited, So, no, definitely hungry, definitely. But again, as excited and motivated our group is to go farther, you got to go one game at a time. That
Yeah,
was our
yeah,
biggest thing for this last season is don't talk about a national championship, right? It's
yeah,
okay to have these long-term goals, right?
yeah,
Have them, but once you set them, like put them away. Put them
yeah,
away and just be the best possible version of you every single day. Every
yeah,
training, every game. Like if we have a Wednesday game and a Saturday game, right? Let's say we got New Paltz on Wednesday
yeah,
and Oneonta on Saturday. If it's Tuesday, your 100% of your thoughts is going directly into New Paltz.
yeah,
We do not
yeah,
start even thinking about Oneonta
yeah,
until we get through New Paltz, right? And
yeah,
like
yeah,
that's the next biggest game is the one that's next, right? So,
yeah,
um, so we got to keep that. We can't get ahead
yeah,
of ourselves, but we are excited.
yeah. I've talked to a number of coaches, and then just that they always say that, like, you the, the first step to winning is just concentrating on today, right?
Yep.
Like, just that's all I care about. It's practice. I want to give the best effort I can today, and because if you go too far out, and I know a few have commented, like, we just let it get ahead of us. We got ahead of ourselves, and then everything came crashing down. And that's, I mean, it's a human tendency, but you're right. Like, if you can keep it focused in on today, on your what your responsibilities are today, then you don't you'll win the day, right? You'll just
Right.
win the day, and that's hopefully you keep doing that every day. It just sort of snowballs. I think you'll
Exactly.
be there. Um, it t- so it just popped into my head. So talk to me about your incoming class a little bit. Is it positional, or is it um, is it about was it about just finding the best soccer players you could? And how many are? Lastly, and how many of those would be transfers? Because I know you guys, because you're a state university, you do have grad programs and whatnot.
Yeah. So right now we have 14 coming in. We have
Wow.
one transfer,
Yep.
Division One transfer from Delaware coming in. We're super excited about him doing his fifth year.
Wow.
So we're super excited about that. And then to answer your question in regards to like how we operate the class, whether it's positional or
Yeah.
the quality player, it's a balance of both, right? To be honest, we want to find the best soccer players that we can find, and hopefully a lot of those guys can be versatile. But there's certain positions you kind of have to recruit specifically for, right? And there's specific characteristics we have in mind for different roles. But at the end of the day, we want to just find the best players possible.
Yeah.
And so, with this class, definitely, one transfer. We have a couple of guys that come from like the prep school route, which is a little bit different from us. We've
Wow,
definitely
that's
had
interesting.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a bad way, but
No, yeah.
that is interesting, right? Like Cortland wouldn't register for me as a place for a prep school kid to put on
Yeah.
their radar.
Yeah, well, and I think that's another reason why culture is so important. Is like even outside of what our academic framework of what our school is and our institution, which is still a great school, right? But like we internally have unbelievably high standards for our guys when it comes to the academic side of things, which I think and that gets showcased in the recruiting process of these are the expectations, right? And like this is that standard that we hold you to. And I think players they love that, they want that, right? Especially for guys that are going that route. So, yeah, we got a guy from Berkshire coming in, a couple guys from Bridgeton Academy in Maine, and then the rest are all kind of true freshmen. They're kind of from all over. So, whether it's like the ECNL route, MLS Next, kind of all over. So, again, we are super excited about it. We think, and I think Steve alluded to it in his interview. Like you never know till guys get here. But I think it's a class that's going to be pushing guys, right? Which that's what we're all about.
What you want.
Right?
That's what you
need.
want.
And if you can do that with true freshmen, great. Sometimes, definitely the last class was a little bit more transfer heavy.
Yeah.
I think we just happened to win a lot of the recruiting battles this time, the first time around, instead of getting it off the portal afterwards.
Yeah.
So,
do you think that it helps that you guys? I mean, look, you're one of the top 20 programs in the country. Like over the last few years, right? This isn't like you're just a flash in the pan. Do you think that's helped in the recruiting process for you?
Absolutely. 100%. There is that consistency you talk about. That's a big piece, right? It's I don't want to. I have to be careful not to jinx myself here, but it hasn't been crazy peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
It's.
Yep.
And I think that's where the culture comes in, right? Like it helps you maintain the standards of who you are, right? Regardless of the group, and so, that's definitely, pushed us through, and I think. And definitely in our spring seasons and preseason for the fall, we certainly test ourselves against Division I opposition and have done well. So we have some data that kind of supports that comparison, because at the end of the day, there is a lot of guys that we talk to that could go the Division I route, and a lot of times we're battling with guys and kind of selling to them why we're the right fit and to go to us versus some Division I schools. Right, and so, so again, that consistency is huge.
Yeah. All right, Coach. Hey, this was fantastic. I'm really glad we connected. This was really good. I think it was really interesting to get your insights as an assistant for Coach Axtell and at Cortland. Do appreciate you taking the time. Hope you listen to your own interview when you get the opportunity. Send it around. Make sure everybody at Cortland, all the thousands of students, subscribe. And but anyhow, no, thank you very much. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And again, thank you for everything that you do for Division III soccer as a whole. But I do think something that goes a little unknown is how many, and again, just being in the recruiting circuits and everything, how many coaches that are assistant coaches like myself that watch those to do exactly what I do. It's I think you're making even way more of a mark than even you probably realize. So for all of those guys, again, I really appreciate it. It's been unbelievable to have this within the Division III soccer world.
Really do appreciate it. And I'll just throw a shout out to all the assistants out there and anybody who's wanting to be next. They're more than welcome. Just shoot me an email, right? Like it's that easy. So, all right,
awesome.
Coach. Thank you very much.
Take care.